In this video, I'm going to be breaking down how resentment is built and destroyed, how you can prevent it, and if it's already happened, how you can overcome it. My name is Warter, former detective of the New Orleans SWAT team turned leadership coach. I have now coached over 850 clients over the last 7 years to build better marriages, businesses, and bodies. And I create these videos to help you become the godly masculine leader who can have it all. Now, resentment is not built up overnight. It is built up incrementally over time through small interactions, whether it is a tonality, an attitude, approaching something the wrong way, something going unsaid, or simply just not feeling safe to be honest or address things with your partner, with your spouse. And over time, that is what builds resentment. And the longer that it goes unaddressed, the more it stacks up and the more distance is created between you and your partner. Open communication is the only thing that can help you actually prevent it from happening and also overcome it if it has already happened. Open communication is the willingness and ability for both partners to be able to address wants, needs, feelings, and issues without fear, delay, or distortion. And if that breaks down, what replaces it is resentment. Over just the last few weeks of being home with a newborn, I got a real-time reminder of how important it is to maintain open communication and how quickly it can break down. Open communication has been a strength and a standard within our relationship for 5 years now. And with having that strong of communication for 5 years, to see it break down in just 3 weeks shows you how fragile open communication is. We had a few small conflicts, small tiffs, and then one that escalated where both of us started to lose our control of our emotions. But in these small interactions, all it took was a moment where I was tired, where she was also tired, and she asked me for something. And I was, I'm cooking 3 meals a day, washing the dishes, cleaning, doing the laundry on top of my business, changing diapers, burping him, all this stuff. I'm exhausted. She's exhausted. She's breastfeeding, trying to rest from surgery and from the whole experience, both emotionally and physically. And she asked me for something, which she has to in order to rest. And because I was tired, and I responded with, when I have time, when I have time. I had just a slight undertone of annoyance or stress. And all it took was 2 to 3 times of her asking me for something and me saying, yeah, when I can get to it. That's all it took. And that quickly led to her stopping asking me to do something for her, which then led to her doing it for herself when she shouldn't be, and then building resentment without me even realizing it. At the same time, something that we have done for the last 5 years as a habit that has helped facilitate and maintain our open communication stopped happening. We stopped going on walks on a daily basis. For 5 years now, we have gone on a walk every morning and or night, if not both, most days. That has helped us with no phones, no distractions, just her and I walking and connecting, talking about our day and then catching up about our day at the end of the day. And in those containers, that has allowed us to talk through a lot of things and to be able to communicate very openly and honestly with each other. And because she ended up having to have a C-section, her recovery is much more intense and she can't go on those walks. And so we haven't been doing that. And so between my poor reactions, which made her feel not safe to actually ask for things, right? Something that seems very small, on top of us not going on the walks and having the habits that have usually helped us facilitate and maintain such a deep level of connection and open communication throughout the years was not happening. And just within 3 weeks, compared to 5 years of a foundation, 3 weeks, it started to break down. And the way that it actually came up is because I started to feel over a few days after this cluster of tiffs that we had been in, I started to feel even more like we were disconnected, like I wasn't feeling the love from her. And leading up to that point, I'm obviously super understanding of the situation and we've got a lot on our hands. So I'm not really like fully thinking about that, but at the same time, can't wait till we can be connecting and being intimate again. But very understanding of it with zero expectations of having any intimacy. But then the disconnection got to the point where I felt like she was cold towards me, or just I wasn't receiving the kind, loving wife that I usually do. And I wanted to address it because I've talked to hundreds of my clients and other men who have had kids and say that at a certain point they felt like they were forgotten about. And I think certain men has different thresholds for this, but I think that it's very natural when all of a sudden now you have this human being that depends on you 100%. But in this moment, it really wasn't actually all about about that as much as it was not realizing that I had allowed open communication to break down and wasn't even meeting my own standards because of my reactions that I was allowing to come out of my mouth and out of my energy, my body language. And yes, obviously being exhausted, being with sleep deprived is a part of it, but it's not an excuse. Right? It's not an excuse to then behave in a way that then makes your partner not feel safe to be open and honest with you on a regular basis. So that was my fault. And so when I went to address this with her of this disconnection that I was feeling, that was actually what came up, was that she has started to make breakfast after like 3 weeks. Start making breakfast again for herself and burping him at night instead of waking me up unless a diaper needed to be changed. And that's just a couple things that she wasn't ready to take back on, but because she felt like I was annoyed with her asking for too much, which was not the case. I was just tired, but because we didn't have the open communication to talk through that so she could understand that, she just took it on herself. And that started to build some resentment. And then of course, not feeling safe to just talk period is a very stressful environment to be in. And so to not feel safe to ask for something, right, that alone can start to build resentment and build it very quickly. So this was a really strong reminder of how quickly your open communication can break down. And when you don't have open communication in your relationship, and when you have fear around communicating anything, right? Delaying a difficult conversation or distorting the truth in a conversation comes from fear, right? So those behaviors originate in fear. Where does that fear come from? That fear comes from the behaviors, the observed patterns of your spouse anytime you bring up this type of thing, right? Or this type of topic. Right? Money was one of them for us for a very long time. And so it's important, it's crucial that you make open communication a standard in your relationship. And if it's a standard, then you will experience something that is similar to what we experienced, where we caught it very quickly because we are so used to being able to communicate openly and honestly with each other without fear, without delay, without distortion. Once all of a sudden that was back into our relationship where fear existed in our communication, and more so in hers, not in mine, then it was clear because we then felt the disconnection that we haven't felt in a long time. If you get value out of this video, please remember to like and subscribe. I make these videos every single week to help you become the man that you are called to be. Here's the truth. Open communication is not something that you have. It is something that you practice because it requires maintenance on a daily basis. And that is why just communicating more isn't the solution. Actually making open communication the standard in your relationship, that is the solution, which requires a team effort in order to accomplish, but it also requires the man to lead it first in order for it to work properly and actually be sustainable. And for it to truly be a standard, the man has to set the standard, then become the standard, meet the standard himself. And it's only then when he has met the standard himself long enough where the woman sees it, where he is led by example, that she will then be willing to be held accountable to that standard. So before we get into the resentment reset framework that I am going to teach you, first I want to be clear with you that resentment is not the problem. It is a symptom of poor communication, bad communication habits, and a disconnection that many times comes from resentment. It is not always resentment, but it's one of the main symptoms that comes from a breakdown in communication. I shouldn't be drinking coffee at 4 p.m., but here we are, newborn stage. So the cost of resentment, the cost of not being able to address it is what you have to understand. It is not just something that impacts your relationship. Because it impacts your relationship, it impacts your children. Because it impacts your connection and your intimacy and your energy towards each other and how you carry yourself, how you talk to each other. If you're holding on to something, you're carrying that into every conversation with each other, every interaction, and your children are watching it. That is the example that you are setting for your children. But it doesn't end there. It cascades into your business, into your work. Because of how stressful it is, it cascades into your health, cascades into your energy. That health, that energy, and the stress, you bring that into the gym or into the story that you use to talk yourself out of going to the gym, out of eating healthy, out of doing what you say you're going to do. And the cascading effect does not stop because it then pours into your spiritual life, into your relationship with God. It pours into the different areas that you don't necessarily notice, right? Friendships, relationships with your parents, with your family, because everybody sees it. So if you guys are out, or you're at a family gathering, or you're out with friends, people, like, they're not going to say anything to you, but they're watching this. They could see it. Everybody can see it. And you guys don't even realize that there's little slight remarks that you guys make to each other, and people catch it. And it's very clear that there's resentment, there's tension that's building, and you guys aren't fully aware of it or aren't sure how to truly overcome it. And so this framework is important, not just to understand, but to execute on, and to execute on together as a team. Because you have to get clear on the common goal. The common goal is you guys don't want to have resentment. You want to have open communication. And it's like, if not, you guys shouldn't be together. But the reality is both people want to feel safe, to address wants, needs, feelings, and issues without fear, delay, or distortion. If you guys both want that as individuals, you should want that for each other. And if you want that for each other, then that is a common goal to get to, because if you can have that common goal, then you can actually have the connection and intimacy that you both desire, and you can have the passion and attraction that's sustainable over long periods of time. But if you don't have the open communication, it will put so much stress on your relationship. And speaking to the man, it will put so much stress on your wife that will increase her cortisol levels, bring her out of hormonal balance, and it'll make it very hard for her to appreciate you. It'll make it hard for her to desire, let alone enjoy sex with you, which will lead you eventually to a sexless relationship, which then cascades into addiction to porn and entertaining other women or cheating. There are so many ways that this problem cascades simply from not having open communication and allowing resentment to build and not being able to catch it and solve it quickly with each other as a team. So I could go on and on about the ways in which this can impact your life. But open communication has to be a standard in every single one of your relationships. As your kids get older, it being a standard within your relationship with them, and business partnerships and friendships. Because anybody that you have a relationship with, you want to be able to have open communication, honesty, right? Them not fearing. If you have employees, them not fearing coming to you and being honest, or them delaying difficult conversations with you or other people on the team, right? Open communication should be a standard all around you with anybody you have influence over or you have consistent interactions with. And the place that it's most important is in your marriage. In your relationship if you are not married yet. I promise you that if you focus on this and you make this truly a standard and you both work towards actually meeting that standard, everything else gets way easier. Solving any other problem in your life gets way easier. Life gets easier. And there will always be problems, right? But you'll trade smaller problems for bigger problems as you continue to grow and succeed. But the way that you navigate them and the peace that you can feel in those and solving those problems because you're doing it as a team with your partner that you love and get along with and communicate well with, it's just way better. It's way better. It's a way better life to live. And so I speak on this topic so much because I just don't think people truly grasp how important it is and how valuable it is as a skill to be able to truly facilitate and maintain as a man and as a leader, no matter what room you're in and what relationship dynamic you're applying it to. This one skill truly has allowed me to build such incredible relationships. In every single dynamic, I have amazing relationships, I have an incredible marriage, and I truly think that open communication, a willingness to confront things quickly, effectively, and sit in the discomfort of these conversations and do so successfully is hands down one of the best skills beyond like discipline and consistency and integrity that I think I possess and wish every man focused on truly obtaining for himself. So let's get into this resentment reset framework. Okay. In this, it's going to also give you a little bit of a framework to develop open communication, but there's so many nuances within that as well that I'm just going to stick to this resentment reset framework. This works whether you are trying to overcome resentment or if you want to prevent it in the future. Step one is awareness. You have to bring awareness and honesty to the fact that if there is resentment there and what caused that resentment. And it's not just big things. It's not the macro, it's also the micro. The micro is really more dangerous because it can go unannounced or unnoticed and it can feel like it's not worth addressing. But every single one of these small micro resentments builds up into this big pile of resentment over time. And so you have to be brutally honest with yourself first of what type of resentment you hold towards your spouse. Doesn't matter what it is, because if you aren't willing to address it, then you're allowing it to be a poison in your relationship. And so the first step is truly the awareness of it. Step 2 is forgiveness. If you're holding on to resentment, you have to release it. You have to let it go. Not because they earned it, but because it is poisoning your heart. It is poisoning your own mind and soul, and it's poisoning your relationship. And it is very clear in Ephesians 4:31 and 32, we are told to let go of bitterness and rage and anger and to forgive just like God forgave us. If you do not forgive, you're going to carry that weight into every conversation, every time you pass by in the kitchen, in the hallway, every interaction you have, it is there. You are bringing it with you everywhere. You're choosing to carry it. And you're carrying it into each of these interactions instead of letting it go, instead of actually forgiving. And if you refuse to forgive, then you refuse to grow and to move on and to actually improve your relationship. And so at that point, you are the one that is destroying your relationship, not the thing that they did that caused you to build resentment in the first place. You think holding on to this thing is going to protect you from it happening again, but the reality is that it is just perpetuating the suffering that is going to lead to worse problems than the problem that you're holding on to in the first place. For many of my clients that I've worked with over the years, I have them write a letter. Now, normally I would suggest a face-to-face conversation for a lot of difficult conversations because there's a lot of growth in there, and then there's lots of layers to that recommendation. But in this case specifically, if you do not feel safe already to be able to communicate openly and honestly with your partner, then it is highly unlikely that you will get everything out that you need to, that you will be able to move all of that resentment energy that is pent up in your body, in your heart, that you have towards them. And so that is why I typically, especially in more intense cases, that I recommend that both partners, or if I'm working with just somebody one-on-one, that they write that letter to that individual and put everything in there. Every single thing that they resent them for, everything that they hold against them, how they brutally honestly feel about it, what it did to them. And in doing that, it can move that energy. Again, this is where the forgiveness part comes in. So in this, I typically have them express all of it and forgive them for all of it within the same letter. What this allows the receiver of this letter to do is also to actually read it and process the information in a way that is grounded, where they can control their emotions or have time to control their emotions instead of reacting and getting defensive and then responding in a way that perpetuates the problem instead of actually helping solve it. Which brings us to step 3, which is taking radical responsibility. Each individual has to take radical 100% responsibility for their words, actions, and reactions. Right? That is no blaming or pointing the finger at anyone else but themselves for what they are in control of. Because every time that you point the finger at anybody else or a situation or a circumstance or a substance, whatever it is, you give your power away to that thing. And the power that you give away is the power to change the outcome. But when both people start to actually take responsibility for their own words, actions, and reactions, instead of becoming enemies and fighting against each other, they begin to solve the problem together as a team. If only one of you takes responsibility, it's not going to work. And if you take responsibility for everything that is in your control, and then you tack on what they are in control of, or you tack on what they're responsible for in that situation, right? It was like, well, this part is absolutely my responsibility. I apologize, but this is also this part was your responsibility. The way that you reacted here, that's your responsibility, that you could control, that you need to take responsibility for. That is robbing them of the opportunity to take responsibility, because instead of them taking responsibility, you're putting that responsibility on them. You are giving them this, this is your responsibility. That's very different from taking responsibility. Not only does it rob them of the power of taking their power back, that they need to in order to be able to focus on what they can control to help change the outcome. But it is also you putting it on them in a way that makes it easy for them to become defensive and resist taking that responsibility. So although in the back of their head they know that you're right, that is absolutely their responsibility, the fact that you are putting it on them instead of giving them the opportunity to take that responsibility themselves, they'll resist it. They'll be prideful and get in their ego, and it'll just slow things down because you are not leading by example in the right way. If you want her to take radical responsibility of her words, actions, and reactions without pointing the finger at anybody else or telling you what your responsibility is, then you need to do the same. Setting an example is doing what you want others to do, what you want them to follow. And so what is the example that you are setting? By creating the right example long enough, you actually give her the time and opportunity to follow that example. Now, in some cases, she won't. And there's many men and clients I've had in the past that were afraid that if they continued to take responsibility and she didn't, then she would just blame everything on him. And that's valid. There's definitely those situations. And in those situations, you do your best to take responsibility long enough to give her the chance to follow by example or follow your example. But if she doesn't, then you can start to ask, what do you think from this is your responsibility? What part of this situation and outcome? But you do that after you've taken full radical responsibility and she has received it. Right? And then you can just say, hey, as far as your part, obviously it takes two, what were you in control over as far as your words, actions, reactions that you can take responsibility for and start to work on. So that way we're both working on this together. Right? That can work, but I would wait. I wouldn't try to ask that immediately if she's not taking responsibility, because you have likely not led by example long enough and set it as a standard and become it to then try to hold her accountable to it or try to help her, nudge her into taking radical responsibility. So again, in order for it to become a standard, you have to set the example, lead by example long enough in order for you to truly meet that standard. Once you have, then you can hold her or somebody else to that standard, but not until you've truly become it yourself. That is leadership. Which brings us to step 4, setting the standard. Open communication has to become a non-negotiable in your relationship, and you have to lead it. And that means actually making sure that you create the space for conversations. You create containers where you guys both sit down to have a conversation where you can be emotionally grounded and you're prioritizing it. You're not letting it go. You're not delaying it. You're not saying we'll deal with this later or you'll deal with this later. You prioritize it. That is what making it a standard is priority. And there's been plenty of times where, now, although a lot of conflict happens at night for people in the evening when they're tired, there's even been plenty of times for my wife and I where we had an altercation or a conflict in the morning. And early on in a relationship, I would just very quickly cut it off. I don't have time for this. I'm trying to get to work. This is bad timing and we'll deal with this later. And in doing that, I would then go to work and be able to compartmentalize and focus. Even if I was angry or even in the back of my head, I'm worried about, I know she's probably pissed or, compounding, it's going to make things worse, but I got to work. I was prioritizing my work over our marriage, over our relationship. And because she can't compartmentalize the way that I can, she really wouldn't be able to do anything all day, be stressed out, pissed off. And then when we did finally come back together, which would end up being midday anyways, because we'd get into it via text or something, then I'd come home and we would resolve it. So, and if the standard was continuously trying to resolve things faster, then it eventually led me to starting to prioritize open communication and the state of our relationship over my work. And at that point, as long as we didn't have a responsibility to somebody else, if I didn't have a call or a meeting or a client or something, then we handle this right now, right here. And sometimes that'd be 2 hours of sitting in the beanbag or on the couch, having conversation, talking through it, having to take breaks because we're getting emotionally charged or even getting out of hand and having to take space for a little bit, coming back together. But we always made sure that always have made sure that we resolve it. Now the standard is same day. And we do not let things go into the next day. Now, over the last 3 weeks, that open communication broke down and we started to let things go unknowingly, started to let things go into the next day. But overall, over the last 5 years, we have not allowed things to go into the next day. We don't go to bed mad. We don't go to bed with things unresolved. And instead, we prioritize it. And that is just a standard in our relationship that has allowed us to continuously deepen our connection, our intimacy, our trust. It's strengthened my leadership, and it's strengthened her ability to trust in my leadership. And that has allowed for a very healthy, harmonious, fulfilling relationship dynamic that we have sustained over the last 5 years. So that's step 4. Step 5 is upholding the standard. This is where most people fail, because they'll start to, bring some awareness to this or prioritize this and work on it for a few weeks. And then life gets busy and they don't prioritize it. And, a year from now, they're like, remember when we had watched that video on YouTube or that podcast and we tried to work on that and we didn't, and now we're still doing this? Like, we should probably do that again, right? Don't do that. Instead, make this a priority. You have to make it a priority in order to actually allow the results to come from it and to change this together. So that is why radical responsibility also needs to be a standard in your relationship. Because if both individuals, both individuals are truly taking radical responsibility for their words, actions, reactions, their habits, their behaviors, their body language, whatever is causing tension or conflict and problems in the relationship, if it is in your control, and that is the only thing that you can change, then is the only thing that's worth focusing on. So that means not keeping score with each other or focusing more on what they haven't done or fixed yet. Instead, you focus on what you are in control of. And if you both are able to do that, and your energy is going into working on yourself to become a better partner and to solve those problems, then you truly do start to solve problems way faster and together. And that alone starts to deepen your connection in your relationship when you see these problems come up, and then you watch each other put in the work to overcome it together, builds this really strong track record and foundation that makes you feel much more safe and secure, not just in your relationship right now, but in the future of it, because the growth-oriented energy and culture within the relationship is so strong that that for the most part, like, you feel like you could overcome anything together. And that's a really strong, confident, and healthy place to be in. What I'll also add to this that is very important is expectations. Your expectation cannot be perfection. You cannot both have a poor reaction, or one of you guys has a poor reaction to something and it turns into a fight, and you say something hurtful to each other, and you tell your spouse, I never want to hear you say that again. Don't ever say that again. Like, and if you're pointing out what it is that they need to work on, you have to understand that it's very unlikely that they're just never going to do it again. It's like if you imagine a train traveling at a high rate of speed. If you hit the brakes, it doesn't just stop. It doesn't just halt. It continues traveling for a moment with a lot of friction and eventually comes to a full stop before it can change directions. Because certain behaviors and habits that each of you have been going on for a long period of time, it is very similar to that, where it is going to take a minute for it to come to a full stop. Now, some stuff for sure, especially like really disrespectful stuff that is like a make or break thing, that may be something that comes much faster because it's much more serious and it hasn't been done as frequently. Whereas something that is a little bit more habitual is harder to stop very quickly. And so the expectation is not perfection, it's progress. As long as you guys are making progress, as long as she's making progress in the way that she addresses this, and you're making progress in how you react to this, if you guys are making progress, you're moving in the right direction. But if the expectation is perfection, then you'll be dissatisfied and disappointed every single time, and that'll just create even more stress on the relationship. Now, if you are in a newer relationship and resentment hasn't built yet, then you can jump the first few steps and go straight to setting the standard and upholding the standard. But if you are in a relationship or a marriage and you are already feeling the disconnection, then you have to start with awareness and forgiveness, or the rest of it is not going to work. And really working on everything isn't going to work, because still you'll be carrying all the resentment into the relationships. That's why you have to start in the beginning, and why those steps are laid out the way that they are. Real quick, if you are realizing that you have been trying to figure this all out on your own, and you don't have a real relationship with God that is grounded in two-way communication where He can guide you in all of your ways, I want you to go to weaponsforchrist.com. It's a free men's Bible study that I run, and I would love to show you and teach you the framework that I've been using for the last 2.5 years now to have direct communion with God every single morning, where He guides me in my business, my marriage, my body, in my being, my confidence, my heart, correcting me and doing all the things that has helped me transform my life in so many ways, that it has written an insane testimonial over the last couple years that I truly just really want to share with you. So if you're interested, go to weaponsforchrist.com and register. And if you can't make the calls, you'll get the replays. And if you have any questions, just make sure you email me back with all of them, and I'll get back to you. Here's the reality. Resentment is going to cost you in so many ways. And the fact that you don't truly know and you can't measure how much it's going to cost you is scary. It's dangerous. Because the longer you allow it to go unaddressed, the more it cascades into the other areas and domains of your life. The more that's going to impact your children, the more that's going to impact your work, your money, your bank account, your health, your fitness, your spiritual life, your relationship with God. It's impacting everything. And if you're the one that's holding it, that's holding the resentment, it's impacting you and affecting you far more than the person you're holding it against. But it is still going to impact both of you. And so I highly encourage you to take these steps exactly how I have laid them out together. Watch this video together. If you're not watching this video together right now, make sure you send it to them to watch, or you end up watching it tonight together. So that way you can talk about it, talk through it, take notes, write down the actual steps and the things that I touched on, and my own part of my story that I've shared that you resonate with and that you know are certain things that you need to work on as well. Because one of the other big mistakes that I made, I'm going to just throw this in here, side note really quick, is I made the mistake of blaming Donna for my poor reactions. Anytime that she came to me with an attitude and I reacted poorly, I would point my finger at her attitude and blame that for my poor reaction, as if I'm not in control of my emotions. In that moment, I was admitting that she was in control of my emotions, not me. And I was giving her my power by saying that she was in control of them, when the reality is that there was a version of me, who I am now today, which I'm really happy to be able to say, that does not react that way and took control over my emotions, took responsibility for my emotions and my reactions. And there's a version of you that no matter how she comes to you, no matter what the attitude is or the tonality, you're able to take a deep breath and stay grounded, see it for what it truly is, not for what it seems like on the surface, and respond in a healthy, strong, masculine way that makes her feel safe, that diffuses the situation very quick. There is a version of you that can do that. And it is on the other side of taking that responsibility instead of blaming her for your poor reaction. Because there's never once where that is truly justified, because there's always a better version of you that can show up. And so it is futile to point the finger when there's way better fruit that will come out of your life if where the finger is pointed always is back at yourself. Now, if you do not address resentment quickly, there is a giant wall of resentments. It's going to build between your two hearts that will build so high you can't climb over it, that will build so deep into the ground that you won't be able to dig under it, and it will become so thick that it'll be discouraging and it'll be hard for you guys to even imagine and figure out how to break it down to get back to being connected again. That is where most couples throw in the towel. That is where couples that never thought they would get divorced or even say the word are all of a sudden having the conversation. So if you don't want to become another statistic, it is important for you to make open communication a standard in your relationship, make taking radical responsibility a standard in your relationship. And by doing that together as a team, it will stop you from having resentment creep into your hearts, disconnect you, and slowly, silently destroy your relationship or your marriage. Because that is exactly what happened to me and my ex-fiance that led to us calling off the wedding. But if you can make open communication and taking responsibility a standard in your relationship, then you remove the space where resentment grows. And the conflict, difficult conversations, confrontation that you have together will truly make you stronger and more connected than it will distant and disconnected. Now let's go over this framework one more time. Step 1 is awareness. Step 2 is forgiveness. Step 3 is radical responsibility. Step 4 is setting the standard. And step 5 is holding the standard. That is it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. This is Dylan J. Warter signing off. Keep your word, do your work, and let God do the rest.